Senator Booker, thanks so much for being with us and sitting down with us.
We're so formal right now.
Yeah.
You could call me Cory. We've known each other for years now.
Thank you so much for all your support of trans people and trans equality. It's been really incredible. And now you're a presidential candidate.
Right.
And
Can I just say one thing though, because
absolutely.
This has been an issue for my adult life.
Mm-hmm.
But and if you're from New Jersey, I've got to give a lot of credit to someone who was my activist inspiration, who's now passed away, Babs Sipperstein, who is just a legend in our state.
Good friend of mine.
Yes, a legend in our state. She was one of these spirits of love and light and toughness and force, that she literally changed the consciousness of our community in a powerful way. And I was very blessed to have her as such a dear friend, and someone who's such a good friend. They tell you exactly what you need to hear, even if you don't want to hear it.
Yes, that was definitely Babs. Well, how did you become such a good trans ally? I mean, Babs was part of it, but what else do you?
Well, I think my parents raised me to understand the intersectionality of justice, and I was very conscious that I had these privileges in life that were the result of struggle, and as my parents taught me as I was growing up, who were very proud of gay Americans like James Baldwin and Byron Rustin and these heroes in the civil rights movement who they themselves were deeply discriminated against. But my parents were champions of this idea that King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And I think that the one thing that made it more real in my life was just being different. We grew up, as my father called us, the 4 raisins in a tub of sweet vanilla ice cream. And because my parents literally had to get a white couple to pose as them 50 years ago this month, no less, in June of '69, which is a Stonewall reunion as well, but it was the same month that my parents were trying to move into New Jersey and were being denied housing. Every time they would show up at a house, real estate agents would tell them that they were sold already. And again, it was this multi-background group of individuals that set up a sting operation to have a white couple pose as my parents so that we could buy our home. And then I grew up in a community where, intentional or not, as you know, often people who are ignorant of your experience will say things that are degrading or assaults on your self-esteem. And having to go through that portal as I grew up, again, a nurturing, loving community, but I was the only African American that many people in my community knew or knew well. I think it really sensitized me by the time I was a teenager to be one of those leaders in high school that was trying to stick up for people that were being bullied, to try to help there to be deeper understanding for people that were quote unquote different. And so by the time I got to college, I then was shaken because I served as a counselor on a crisis hotline. And when I sat down, and one of the counselors, the LGBTQ counselors, was a man named Daniel Bao, who is still to this day one of the more beautiful people I've met in my life journey. And I started seeing the calls, the large amount of phone calls this crisis center got about people who were struggling with coming out, struggling with their own identity, and to see the love and the beauty with which not only he dealt with that, but also took the time to take this teenage football player from New Jersey and talk to me through these issues. And it just deepened it even more for me. So I think I became an activist by the time I was a senior in college. This was one of the issues that I felt appalled to see, the kind of violence and hate that was so predominant in an enlightened campus like Stanford University.
Right.
And I think that by that time, all of that background made me make this one of the issues to me that was essential if we were ever going to be who we say we are, which is a nation of liberty and justice for all.
Well, that's amazing. Thank you. Now, if I'm correct, and I think I am, your very first vote in the Senate was a pro-transgender vote.
It was one of the early, I think there were some procedural votes for it, but yes, it was.
The first substance vote.
The first substantive vote, yeah, which was, to me, the fact that I could be in the Senate for a historic day like that, it really made me feel this jubilance to know that I got to be there for that moment.
Right, for the Employment Non-Discrimination Act.
Yes.
So I was there. You may not remember that, but I was there, and I remember you came off the floor and you were like, my first real vote.
I actually remember that moment. We were standing in that reception area right off the floor.
The very
I remember
fancy
seeing
one.
it.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Well, that's wonderful. And now you're a co-sponsor of the Equality Act.
Yeah, but I want to go back because I think that what a lot of folks don't understand is how much progress we made, but how much progress we still have to go. When I was mayor of the city of Newark, we had like really bad incidences in my city. A woman named Sakia Gunn was killed on the main strip in Newark.
Waiting for a bus, as I
Yeah,
recall, right?
a guy made an advance at her, and she said, "I'm gay," and he gets out of the car and stabs her to death. And by that time, I had a friend of mine was the chairwoman of the board for the Harvey Milk School and the Hetrick Martin Institute, and I visited a number of times, and I had become more aware of the data affecting children in my community about homelessness, fear of even going to school. And so when I became mayor of the city, I said, I'm going to create safe spaces for my community, and I'm going to rate the first flag I'm going to raise after the American flag in front of City Hall, something that had never been done before, was the pride flag. And then again, that's when it was revealed to me how deep a lot of the hate was, because we got calls to City Hall full of hatred for LGBTQ Americans, and they weren't anonymous. These were people telling me, I retract my endorsement of you. You're not welcome back in my religious institution, and I will work against you in your future campaigns. And I remember how upset I was that I told my staff we need to do more. I declared that I would not, this is 2006, marry, as a mayor, you can officiate weddings. I said I will not do that until everybody in my state can officiate. And we became very much activists, using every lever we could do. We formed our first commission, to LGBTQ commission, to study the issues. We had policing issues, frankly, as people today know, that these issues of safety and being disproportionately subject to violence, it comes not just from the community at large, it comes from police as well. And we had real issues when I was mayor that we had to deal with in terms of policing. So having actually had to run something, we worked every single day to try to change the status quo and make Newark a more welcoming, a more safe, a more empowering community for all our residents.
That's wonderful. So you're now a co-sponsor of the Equality Act.
Yeah, I'm really proud of that. Original co-sponsor.
Thank you.
Yes, no, it's one of the prouder moments I've had in the Senate, and working with an extraordinary group of legislators on both sides of the political aisle. And I think most Americans, I was in New Hampshire at a town hall, and I still remember the guy. He started arguing with me in mid-town hall when I said that we still live in a country where the majority of states, you can be fired from your job, denied service, just because of who you are. And he said, that's not true. And I go, it is 100% true. And I think most Americans have no idea.
No, they don't.
About how the level of injustice. And for me, as a kid that grew up with parents and grandparents telling me stories about what it was like trying to drive across this country, not being able to stop at gas stations, or not being served, and people using religious justifications.
Yeah.
It is very fresh to me, and it's something that to me is outrageous. And we may have the right to marry now, but we have a long way to go until we really are who we say we are, that nation of justice.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we wanted to find out what transgender people thought they would want to hear from presidential candidates.
Yes.
And so we've done this brief video here. If you would take just a minute to look at it.
Yes, please.
And I want to know what you will do to help kids that are transgender in schools.
So in the video, a lot of folks have talked about their access to health care, their access to transition-related health care, but just health care in general. What's your position on health care that trans people should care about, should feel like you're on their side, and how are you going to help?
Well, we see such hostility towards trans communities from this administration that the assaults on the ACA and the advancements that the Obama administration, now there's rules in to try to pull protections away from trans Americans. We have from military service to the kind of healthcare access you have in prisons and jails. This is a real issue and a real concern. And we have to, number one, fight on these issues, but make people understand that this is vital to health and well-being, and often life or death issues. And so for me, my commitment is not just trying to stop, or if he's successful, roll back what this administration has done, but we have a lot more advances that we have to do. the discrimination from insurance companies, the discrimination from employers who want to use religious exceptions and deny people fundamental basic health care is unacceptable to me. And it shows you how much further we have to go to stop the backsliding of this administration, but more importantly, to advance and gain ground until we have equal health care access for all.
So, Senator Booker, an issue that's really important to you is criminal justice reform, and it's also very important to transgender people. We face criminal justice system problems, whether we're interacting with the police on the street, or whether we've been a witness to a crime or a suspect in a crime. Trans people who have been incarcerated are dramatically mistreated. What's the role of the president in all of that?
So I take it, our criminal justice system is deeply unjust, period. And those injustices tend to feed upon people that are more marginalized in our society, more vulnerable in our society. And so what you're saying about the trans community is far more dramatic than I think people realize. Everything from policing issues, and you said from witnessing crimes to being targeted by police officers for harassment or worse, all the way to court systems and how they're dealing in the sentencing process, in jails, before you even get sentencing, treatment, all the way to the time in prison as well, to reentry issues as well. So this is a system that, for me, needs comprehensive reform. I've been saying that since I was in college. And for trans Americans, this is a system that unfortunately is deeply biased and punishing to that community. And so I will be a president that speaks this out, spells out to people the crisis, how it's a cancer on the soul of our country, should we not address it? And I will make sure that we do common sense things. And there's things we can do from the federal level. You know, Obama had this very great effort that started with a 21st century policing a commission that had some very good recommendations. I would want to do more than that, even though, to start focusing and pulling together folks to make recommendations when it comes to the LGBTQ community in general and policing. And then start to look at federal prisons. One area that people don't often talk about this is the immigration policy and immigration lockups. These are private prisons, many of them, that have, in my opinion, very bad records when it comes to the LGBTQ community in particular, but in general, but in particular the trans community. So for me, this is a urgency, because right now as we sit here, there are trans Americans who are suffering at the hands of an unjust system that feeds upon the vulnerable populations.
Wonderful. One of the most intractable problems that we as trans people face is violence and murder. Part of it is about the criminal justice system, but part of it is about the economics in the country. Part of it is about ignorance. But particularly if you're a young trans woman of color, you're just so much more likely to face violence in this country. Have you thought about that much, and where do you think you can help out there?
I mean, have I thought about it? A lot. 29 African American trans women killed in 2017. 26 killed last year, and this year I think we're in the double digits already. This is something that should have everyone in this country concerned and frankly outraged, that you have a community that's being disproportionately targeted with heinous acts of violence, and ultimately, as we've seen in these cases I've enumerated, in homicides. And so I'm going to be someone that speaks to this crisis and begins to take specific measures to do something about that. And this is why this administration's awful acts by removing trans protections from the Department of Education and the work they were doing in schools to make them safe environments, by removing the DOJ's sense of urgency on dealing with protections for trans Americans. This is even around issues, as we said already, in immigration. It's around issues in police accountability. There are so many areas where just your physical safety, if you're a trans American, is under threat in this country right now, and I won't tolerate it. And so I will be a president that is very aggressive in calling out these issues and putting forward the best of who we are to stop this kind of targeting, harassment, violence, and murder.
Thank you very much. One of the things you just mentioned there was around education in schools. In the video, young Avery, a 12-year-old trans person, talked about how important it is to know that she feels safe in school. And as you mentioned, the Trump administration has stripped away some protections we had. They've basically refused to protect trans students and to stand up for trans students. Do you have a plan beyond reinstituting the guidance from the Obama administration? Where would you go with this?
So let's celebrate Avery, the leader she is obviously already. And I love that not only did she stand up to ask us questions, but I can just tell by that video that she's someone who is taking on this issue in the work that she does. My brother's child, my nephew, which is a combination of niece and nephew, is a trans activist who has helped their uncle be someone who is more aware of the specific issues facing trans youth in our schools today. That kind of leadership right now from these courageous activists, I think we shouldn't discount that power that they are bringing forth on these issues. And so I want to be a president that not only gives guidance, but is actively using my platforms. You see this president using his platforms to demean and degrade. I think that this is a moral moment in America, and that the next president has to be someone that understands that there's a restoration of the best of our values. It has to be done from that office by elevating how we are rendering populations in this country invisible, marginalizing them is just not acceptable to me. So I hope that one day, very soon, let's call it maybe less than 2 years, that Avery, my nephew, and other great trans leaders in the youth community have a seat at the White House to talk about issues. Because as I've learned from Babs, as I've learned from my nephew, we need to have leaders that say, I don't have all the answers when it comes to trans youth, but I'm willing to elevate folks to let them sit as peers with me on figuring out how we can best call to the moral imagination of a nation to stop the reality, not just for trans children, but for LGBTQ youth. About 30% admit to missing school because of fear. We have to address that, because to deny people safe and nurturing environments means that we're undermining their potential, their growth, and our benefit from the genius of the next James Baldwin, from the artistry of the next great artist. I mean, there's so much wealth of potential and possibility that we need to give a chance to flourish and not create environments of fear, of harassment, of bullying.
That's really great. So I'm just going to close by asking if you could say anything to kids, trans kids, or to parents of trans kids, or to the young Black trans woman who's really afraid to walk outside for her safety. What kind of message would you send to any of those groups?
Well, the direct message I have is, I was learned from a woman on the 5th floor of the projects in Newark that hope is the active conviction that despair will not have the last word. And these are despairing times. I always say these are heartbreaking times. That if America hasn't broken your heart, then you don't love her enough. Because when you see the trans violence, the discrimination, the hate, the murder, these are heartbreaking things, but they don't define us. What happens to us, the bigotry, the discrimination, the hatred, that doesn't define us. What defines us is how we choose to respond. And to see courageous leaders now pushing this issue. When I walk through the hallways of the Senate and I see, in the Hart Senate building, and I see trans flags in front of senators' offices, I know we are elevating this issue in the right way and starting to build consciousness. We have so much more work to do. And I want to say to the trans community that I know these have been dark years, but help is on its way. And you will have a president, you will have leaders, I don't care what title I hold, you will have stronger and stronger allies in this cause. The arc of the moral universe, as King said, is long, but it bends towards justice. History is on our side. Now, time is a neutral thing, and I don't think things change just because of inevitability. We have to make them change. We have to be the arc benders. But I know where we are going as a country. We are going to bend this arc. We're going to bring about justice. And there will be a day, I know we're going to get to this day, where we don't have videos of people saying it gets better, that we have a chorus of people standing up and saying, we made it better.
It's wonderful. Well, I'm really very thankful for your time.
Thank you.